Okay, Alexander, let's talk about what's going on with Turkey and Syria. And Turkey is really in the news a lot, it seems, these days. There is an election, by the way, coming up in Turkey, and the polling is not so. I don't want to say it's bad for Erdogan, but it's not so positive. I still think he'll stay in power. But anyway, you have some domestic stuff in Turkey. Obviously, they still have a problem with inflation, but you also have the Turkish vote for NATO, Finland and Sweden. But you also have an incursion into Syria. What is going on with Turkey and what's going on with Syria as well, with regards to the Kurds? That's
Yes,
why
well, what's
they're
happening?
moving into
Yeah,
Syria. The
exactly. Well,
excuse they're
what's
using.
happening? Excuse what they're using. What's happening is that Erdogan, who is never a person to miss an opportunity, especially when economically he's back up to the wall. I mean, there's inflation in Turkey's been 70% recently, so he's got a real serious problem in Turkey. So what he's doing, he's using the fact that the two superpowers that he has to deal with, the United States and Russia, are both distracted to try to make as much noise and as big an effect as he possibly can, and at the same time to promote his own agenda. So the Russians need to keep him on side because he's keeping the Black Sea closed. He's threatening to stop NATO expanding to Finland and Sweden. He's refusing to support sanctions against Russia. He's acting as, I think, from a Russian point of view, a reasonably accommodating mediator with Zelensky. So, the Russians want to keep him on side and they want to keep him reasonably quiet in Ukraine. So they're letting him do some more damage in Syria, more damage, incursions in Syria and whatever. And at the same time, the Americans are also obsessed with Ukraine, with Russia. They've got China on their plate. So at the same time, what Erdogan is doing is he's tweaking the Americans. Finland and Sweden can't join NATO because they back the Kurds, which, by the way, it's not entirely without validity. But the United States isn't listening to Turkish concerns about the Kurds. So Turkey expands its areas of control in Syria. It targets the Kurdish militia there. It threatens control of some of these Syrian oil wells, which the United States has been occupying. And of course, it increases its pressure on the United States. Meanwhile, he holds out for F-16 deals from the Americans. He says, you've got to give me the F-16 because it's a sign of, your good faith to me. He quarrels with Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister of Greece. He says, Mitsotakis is dead to me because he opposes the F-16 sale when, he goes to Congress. And he's also invited Biden to Turkey, except Biden says he's not going. And of course, Erdogan is running with that. Biden is insulting Turkey. So he's pursuing a domestic agenda. He's showing, that he's throwing his weight around for Turkey, but he's also using this to extract advantage. And he's doing this specifically in Syria. He's enlarging the areas of his control. He's got both the Russians and the Americans on the back foot.
Is this more in Syria? Is it more of a threat to Assad, or is this more of a threat to the American presence in Syria? I mean, okay, the Kurds, yes, he's obviously targeting the Kurds. That's fine, but who is this going to irk more? Is this going to really piss off the Americans more because they are occupying Syria throughout this whole Ukraine thing? No one talks about the fact that the U.S. is illegally occupying Syria, a part of Syria. No one wants to mention that. Is this going to piss off the Americans more, or is it going to piss off the Assad government in Syria more?
In the short term, it's going to piss off the Americans more. The Americans have actually spoken out about it. Remember, Erdogan and Biden don't get on. So that's one thing to say. I mean, they don't like each other. The Americans are unhappy about the moves Erdogan is making, the Turks are making towards the Kurds. and the Americans are actually making it pretty clear that they're unhappy. So the Americans are irked by this, and they're more irked by it than the Syrians and the Russians are. Having said that, because the Americans are more angry and more upset, and because there's trouble now between Turkey and the US, that doesn't mean that the Russians and the Syrians are happy. In the long term, Turkey enlarging the areas under its direct control in Syria is a threat to the Assad government and is a problem for Russia. And I think both Damascus and Moscow would much rather that this didn't happen. They would much rather that Erdogan stayed where he was, kept out of Syria. I don't think they're pleased by these moves at all. But for the moment, the Russians feel that they have to accommodate him, even as I said, even as they do it, I suspect, through clenched teeth.
Is Erdogan overextending this time, or do you think he's game planned this out pretty well?
Well, at the moment, I think he's in a strong position. As I said, I think he's in a position. I mean, he's playing the Americans and the Russians off against each other, which is the game he loves to play, and he's doing it with skill. The Americans and the Russians are each absorbed with Ukraine. He's probably going to get economic advantages from the Russians in terms of grain, food, and cheaper fuel, which will help him with his inflation problems. So overall, and of course, because the lira, the Turkish lira, is in decline, and the ruble has been quite strong, that puts him in a good position to increase Turkish exports to Russia. We mustn't forget about these considerations, and there's already been a big deal done. So he's playing the Russians and the Americans off against each other. He's getting economic deals from the Russians. He's expanding his area of influence in Syria. Ultimately, as always happens with Erdogan, he does overplay his hands, because both the Russians and the Americans, deep down, must be seething about this. They don't trust him. I suspect deep down they don't even like him very much. But the Russians, for the most part, at the moment, need him, and the Americans to a great extent too. So he's able to get away with it. But the problem with Erdogan is always in the end, he overplays his hand, and always in the end it goes wrong. But that's the long term or the medium term. For the moment, he's winning.
Yeah, and it seems like Turkey is dead set on not giving the yes vote for Finland and Sweden unless they get some major concessions. I still think they'll vote yes. Like, that's what I personally believe, but I don't know. They're really digging in. They're saying, unless we get things in return, we're not going to give our yes just like that.
No, absolutely. Cavusoglu, the Turkish foreign minister, said, if anybody thinks, that that Turkey is just going to be talked round without, substantive concessions, then they're completely deluding themselves. And Erdogan has said things about Finland and Sweden, which I think he'd have difficulty walking back unless he got those substantial concessions. I think he will get substantial concessions. He won't get all of what he's asking for, but I think he'll get a large part of it. But the problem isn't Erdogan's willingness to do a deal on this. He's actually said he's prepared to do a deal. The problem is that I think the neocons and the Biden White House might find it very, very difficult to meet his demands, even his scaled down demands. As I said, Biden and Erdogan don't like each other, which is already a problem. But on top of that, I get the sense that there is real anger in Washington towards Turkey. And I think they may say to themselves, well, either Erdogan is bluffing, in which case we'll call his bluff, or if he is not calling his bluff, well, we'll support this deal, this project that Britain's Johnson is coming up with, this new Finnish, Swedish, British alliance, which is going to have a military dimension. We'll support that, and we'll find a way to integrate Finland and Sweden into our military structures, even if it's done outside NATO. I think that would not really go down well in Finland and Sweden, by the way. But I can imagine that there are people in Washington at the moment who are thinking like that. And I don't think it's a done thing, because if that's the thinking in Washington, then I don't see how Erdogan can row back on this.
Yeah, and just quickly, Alexander, there's a lot of tension now between Greece and Turkey as well. Even the Greek government is saying that they've got the military on high alert, and it could be a bit of gamesmanship and distraction from both parties. Erdogan, obviously, by ratcheting up tensions with Greece, maybe he thinks he's going to get some a boost in his popularity and in the polling numbers. And Mitsotakis, I'm sure, is also betting that tensions with Turkey will be a nice distraction to his terribly run foreign policy and the gaffes that he's made with regards to Russia and Ukraine, and the fact that Greek society as a whole is turning very much against the Mitsotakis
Yes.
government with regards
Yes.
to inflation, price increases, and the stance that they've taken with Russia. So there may be a bit of distraction and gamesmanship on both sides that would explain the high alert military tensions.
I agree with that. I would say again, Erdogan is going to have real problems walking back some of the things he said about Mitsotakis. I mean, he said that he's never going to meet Mitsotakis, that Mitsotakis is dead for him. He says that he feels betrayed by Mitsotakis going to the Congress in the US and lobbying against the F-16 sales, the sale of these fighter jets to Turkey. So, he's said some incredibly strong things about Mitsotakis, and he's going to have trouble walking that back. And there is always a risk that this thing could get out of control. Always. With Erdogan, you can never be sure. He's always, up to now, known how far to go, and then when things get really difficult to step back. But he's tired, he's stressed, he's back. I mean, he's to the wall in terms of the economy in Turkey. Mitsotakis is also under great economic pressure in Greece, great political pressure in Greece. There's always the risk that something could go horribly wrong. And then, of course, we could have another big crisis on our hands in the Eastern Mediterranean on top of the one in Ukraine. And my goodness, if that happens, well, I wonder what the Ursulas and the Victoria Newlands, which of these two conflicts they'd prioritize. But that's another matter.
Yeah. All right. We will leave it there. The Duran.locals.com, everybody, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off when you use the code GOODDAY. Take care.